So I want to quickly deal with this whole lie underpinning the argument that we need to send the military into American cities to reduce crime. Now, we all know that that's not the real reason Donald Trump is doing it, which I'll get to in a minute. But that's just the pretext for sending troops in. That's just the excuse. That's just his stated reason. Because he has to give some reason. He can't just send them in there. I mean, I guess he can. When you're a dictator, you can do whatever the hell you want. But I guess he still, he hasn't so completely turned the United States into a military dictatorship, at least not yet. Though, so I guess he still feels compelled to offer some sort of a reason, even if it's complete bullshit. And the reason they give for sending military into American cities is to reduce crime. That the crime rate is out of control because of Democrats, blah, blah, blah. Of course, that's all bullshit. The crime stats are all lies. But that's the argument they're giving. Now, I don't want to address the crime stats. You already know those are lies. I want to talk about the idea, just the general idea that you can use the military to reduce crime, which is itself a bullshit argument. Now, if you put armed military troops into American cities patrolling the streets, you will reduce crime for as long as they're there in the areas in which they're patrolling, right? Because criminals aren't stupid. They're not going to go out and commit crimes in the presence of armed troops. But as soon as those troops leave, the crime rate will go back up. Right? Now, the only way to continue keeping the crime rate low, or lower, and again, it's only going to lower the crime rate right in the immediate presence of the troops. If the troops aren't in an area, if they're not patrolling some block, that's not going to suppress crime there. So anyway, but to the extent that you get any reduction in crime from the presence of armed troops, then that will only continue for as long as they are there. Soon as they're gone, things go back to normal. Criminals will do what they're going to do. So, are we prepared to accept in perpetuity armed troops on the streets of American cities? Is that what are we prepared to live in a country controlled by the military, in fact, a military dictatorship, as Donald Trump wants? Because that is what you're going to have to accept if you even accept the bullshit argument that we need the military on our streets in order to reduce crime. So anyway, so there's that. Now, secondly, I want to deal with the real reason why Donald Trump is doing this, because none of us, no thinking person, believes that Donald Trump is doing this to reduce crime. He doesn't give a shit. He only cares about things that directly affect him. And crime in the inner city is not something that affects Donald Trump. It's not something that he gives a shit about. So why is he doing it? Well, there's a number of reasons he is doing it. And the timing of these things, I think, depend on what's going on at the particular moment in time. He can use these things for distraction and any number of reasons. But fundamentally, he was always going to do this. Now, the timing in particular cities may have to do with politics, but he was always going to do this because he, in fact, wants to destroy this country, to destroy our laws, our constitution, our system of federalism, our democracy, and he wants to replace it with a military dictatorship that he controls. And so getting troops on the streets of our cities and getting Americans accustomed to that is part of his plan. But I think also part of the reason he's doing this is to rig the outcome of future elections, including the next election, the midterm elections next year. And I think the way that the military presence in these cities will figure into that is if you put military on the streets in blue areas, you are likely to be able to suppress the turnout in those areas. Now, when we're talking about the midterm elections, we're talking about Congress. So Donald Trump, he doesn't need to win every race. He just needs Congress to continue to be controlled by his cult, the Republican Party. And so all you really need to do is ensure that a handful of key races go your way. And these races are often close, and they are decided by a few percentage points. Now, if you, and importantly, when we're talking about blue districts in the inner city, these are small districts geographically speaking, because there is the population is concentrated. So all you need to do is put heavy military presence in certain key districts to suppress Democratic turnout in those areas. And if you do it just by a few percentage points, that could be enough to tip the scales in that district, in that election. And if you do that in certain key districts around the country, you can keep control of the House of Representatives and the Senate. I mean, the Senate's different because that's by state. But again, even in those states, the geographic area is the entire state. But Democratic votes are much more highly concentrated, geographically speaking, than Republican votes are, because Republicans tend to, the rural districts are Republican, and the urban areas are much more Democratic. So again, the same strategy would apply whether you're targeting specific congressional districts or states more broadly speaking. So for example, Pennsylvania, just take Pennsylvania. You don't need to have military all across Pennsylvania. If you look at a map of Pennsylvania, it's pretty solid red except for a few key urban areas. So just have a strong military presence in the city of Philadelphia. Suppress the vote there. Suppress the Democratic turnout in Philadelphia by a few percentage points, and that could make all the difference in the Senate election. I don't know if there's a Senate election in Pennsylvania this year. Not the point. I'm just using Pennsylvania as an example. But anyway, that's what I think this is all about. It's to condition the American people to accept military dictatorship. And that begins by accepting the idea of having armed military patrolling our streets. Now, if you can get the people to accept it for law enforcement purposes, well, then that's it. He's already in there, and then the mission changes. It goes from law enforcement to controlling the people. Once you let him in, that's it. It's too late to do anything about it. That's what he's doing. He's conditioning the American people to accept the military on the streets of American cities. And then also in the short term, because that's a more long-term plan. It's really not that far off, but it's more long-term than the next election. And that's also what this is about. Suppressing vote in Democratic areas. That's why he's targeting Los Angeles. That's why he's targeting, Washington, D.C. He's doing that because it's easier for him to do it there. But now he's moving on to Chicago, Baltimore. These are all Democratic areas, Democratic strongholds. That's what it's all about. Anyway, what do you think? Let me know. And thanks for watching. I appreciate it.